19th century, along the slow winding currents of a secluded Missouri River, a family lived in quiet obscurity, their lives seemingly ordinary to any passerby. Yet beneath the veneer of domestic normality lay a darkness that would eventually ripple outward, capturing the attention of neighbors, lawmen, and historians alike. The mother, a figure whose name and face remained shrouded in mystery, maintained the household with a meticulous precision that belied the grotesque reality of her hidden acts. Villagers remembered her as attentive, dutiful, yet often distant, her eyes holding a depth of thought that few could penetrate. There were whispers, subtle murmurs among townsfolk, of a life so insular it seemed almost to exist apart from the world around it. A life where the river itself became a witness to acts that defied both morality and comprehension. As the seasons changed, the quietude of daily life masked an undercurrent of dread. Children played along the riverbank, their laughter contrasting sharply with the mother's internal deliberations. She moved with a calm deliberateness that, in hindsight, foreshadowed events that would haunt the region for decades. Her interactions with neighbors were polite, measured. No one suspected that the foundation of family and domestic care could conceal such an unthinkable pattern of behavior. Local travelers occasionally noted her presence in the market or along forest paths. Her demeanor serene, almost ethereal, yet there was something in the stiffness of her movements, a rigidity that spoke to a mind preoccupied with matters unseen. It began in subtle ways. Small disappearances of animals, whispers of fish thrown into the river in unusual patterns, murmured to herself as she performed nightly tasks. Those who glimpsed the oddities, objects floating downstream, faint traces along muddy banks, could not piece together their significance. The river, a life source and a boundary for the community, became a silent participant, carrying away remnants of acts that were never spoken of aloud. The tension between the apparent tranquility of rural life and the emerging mystery created a pervasive unease, a feeling that beneath the ordinary lay a world of hidden calculation, where observation alone could not reveal the full story. As months passed, the mother's methods became increasingly systematic. She moved with ritualized precision, preparing meals and performing chores that concealed more than they revealed. Visitors occasionally remarked on the freshness of food, the care and presentation, never suspecting that the source of sustenance had a sinister origin. The family maintained an outward appearance of cohesion. Children attended local gatherings, neighbors were greeted politely, and the home emitted no outward sign of chaos. This ordinary exterior heightened the horror for those who would later uncover the truth, demonstrating how normalcy can mask profound aberration. The river itself held a strange role in the narrative. It was at once a lifeline and a grave, a conduit for nourishment and disappearance. Those who later explored the banks recalled an odd symmetry in the flow, a natural rhythm that seemed to echo the mother's methodical movements. Fish swirled in eddies, branches leaned over currents, and occasional mists rising from dawn waters cast ethereal shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of acts long hidden. The river, calm and indifferent, became an unwitting chronicle, recording deeds that the world would only later struggle to comprehend. One night, a distant neighbor reported seeing lantern light flickering strangely across the water, illuminating a figure kneeling at the river's edge. The mother's posture was composed, hands moving with precision, and yet the scene radiated an unsettling tension. It was a tableau of domesticity interwoven with an unknowable purpose, where ritual and routine merged into a single, haunting performance. Those who witnessed it from afar could only interpret fragments, flashes of reflection, the glint of water, a silhouette motionless against the current. The mind instinctively sought narrative in the chaos, yet the true horror remained obscured, the unknown heightening the sense of dread. Stories from the local community were fragmented, often contradictory. Some spoke of children who fell mysteriously ill or who were rarely seen beyond the riverbank. Others mentioned the strange quiet of nights when the mother walked outside, her figure illuminated briefly by candlelight before disappearing into shadowed foliage. The pattern, subtle yet persistent, suggested deliberation and intentionality, yet it was impossible for the average observer to link these disparate observations into a coherent explanation. Fear, curiosity, and moral unease coalesced, creating an atmosphere in which every mundane event carried potential significance, every ripple in the river a portent of hidden truths. By the time the first serious inquiries arose, The river had claimed its role as both accomplice and confessor. The mother's careful orchestration of domestic life and her concealment of deeds created a dual narrative, one of ordinary rural existence and one of subtle but profound horror. Outsiders who stumbled upon fragments, discarded objects, fleeting glimpses, or rumors carried along gossiping tongues experienced a tension between recognition and disbelief. The human mind struggled to reconcile the visible warmth of a mother tending her home with the invisible acts she had committed, revealing the uncanny capacity of ordinary life to harbor extraordinary darkness. As this story begins, the audience is invited into a world where calm surfaces conceal devastating truths, where the serenity of a Missouri River and the composure of a mother hide patterns of unimaginable consequences. The narrative unfolds slowly, deliberately, weaving between historical context, psychological inquiry, and the chilling observation of human behavior under pressure. This is a tale not of spectacle, but of quiet horror, the kind that lingers invisible but persistent. In the rhythms of domestic life, the flow of water, and the silent observation of a community unaware of what truly lies beneath. The mother, enigmatic and unknowable, stands at the center of this narrative. Her motivations remain obscured by time, culture, and circumstance, leaving the story open to reflection on societal pressures, maternal roles, and the intersection of isolation and morality in rural 19th century America. Her figure is at once ordinary and terrifying, a vessel through which history, culture, and human psychology converge to produce an enduringly unsettling tale. As the audience moves forward into the unfolding story, they are drawn into a careful examination of context, consequence, and the chilling power of routine interwoven with deliberate cruelty. This is the hook, where curiosity meets dread, and where the stage is set for the exploration of history, culture, and the haunting shadows of human behavior along the quiet banks of the Missouri River. Missouri in the mid-19th century was a land of contradictions, a state perched on the edge of expansion and entrenched traditions. Settlers lived largely in rural homesteads, isolated by rivers, forests, and the vast expanse of farmland. Towns were sparse and communities relied heavily on the cooperation of neighbors, yet distances and challenging terrain meant that much of daily life unfolded in private, often without oversight. In this context, the family that would later become infamous remained largely insulated from broader societal scrutiny, their lives shaped by the rhythms of work, seasonal cycles, and the limited social networks of their locality. Agriculture formed the backbone of Missouri's rural economy, and families relied on subsistence farming to sustain themselves. Crops of corn, wheat, and vegetables were supplemented by livestock, which provided meat, dairy, and labor. This combination of self-reliance and isolation created both resilience and vulnerability. Families could exist almost entirely within the bounds of their land, yet the pressures of survival, particularly during lean seasons, exacerbated the stresses of domestic life. For a mother responsible for feeding and maintaining a household, the burdens of ensuring food, shelter, and safety were immense, creating a context in which extreme behavior could emerge unnoticed. Social structures were rigid and deeply influenced by tradition. Patriarchal hierarchies governed family life, and the roles of women, though varied, often centered on domestic management and the moral education of children. In frontier and semi-rural settings, women were expected to maintain order, provide sustenance, and uphold social proprieties. The mother at the center of this narrative navigated these expectations with outward composure, presenting a facade of dutiful domesticity while concealing actions that would later shock observers. The contrast between societal expectation and private action underscores the tension between public perception and hidden realities in historical communities. Religion and morality played pivotal roles in shaping behavior and community oversight. Churches were centers not only of spiritual guidance but also of social regulation. Congregants monitored one another's behavior, and moral transgressions were subject to communal censure. Yet in dispersed rural areas, enforcement of these norms was inconsistent. Isolation allowed certain behaviors to escape immediate notice, and the river, a vital resource, also provided a space where acts could be carried out beyond the gaze of neighbors. The interplay between moral expectation, geographic isolation, and practical necessity created conditions in which the mother's actions could remain hidden, while the social narrative of the family remained ostensibly normal. Education in rural Missouri was rudimentary, and literacy rates varied widely. Children learned basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, often supplemented by religious instruction or practical knowledge needed for farm work. The mother's role in overseeing education and daily routines reinforced her central position in the household. Her authority, unquestioned in most respects, extended to management of resources, discipline, and the maintenance of family reputation. This concentration of influence, combined with physical isolation, provided a framework in which extreme behaviors could persist undetected, particularly when intertwined with the natural cycles of work and subsistence that occupied neighbors' attention. Community interactions were governed by a mixture of necessity and tradition. Neighbors relied on one another for assistance with harvests, livestock care, and emergency support. Social events such as markets, church gatherings, and communal celebrations allowed observation of behavior, yet even these occasions were intermittent. Between visits, families existed in a semi-private domain where routine, monotony, and the demands of survival limited interference. The mother's environment, therefore, offered both the tools for management and concealment, creating a tension between the visible and invisible spheres of influence. Missouri's natural environment also shaped life profoundly. Rivers, forests, and wetlands defined boundaries and resources. Waterways were critical for irrigation, transport, and food, while dense woods offered both shelter and concealment. The river, which would later play a pivotal role in the narrative, was both a source of life and a conduit for acts removed from immediate observation. Seasonal flooding, ice, and variable currents created both opportunities and hazards. The mother's intimate knowledge of these natural patterns allowed her to manipulate outcomes subtly, leveraging environmental conditions in ways that further obscured her actions. Economic pressures, especially in a pre-Civil War setting, were ever present. Missouri's position as a border state meant that political and social tensions occasionally intersected with economic instability. Families were acutely aware of the consequences of scarcity, and resource management was a constant concern. In this climate, acts that might appear grotesque or incomprehensible can be contextualized within an understanding of survival, scarcity, and the psychological strain of isolation. This is not to excuse transgression, but to situate behavior within the historical realities of rural life. Local governance and law enforcement were limited. Sheriffs and constables operated over wide territories, often relying on community reporting to identify issues. In the case of isolated families, delayed or fragmented communication reduced oversight. Rumors, when they emerged, often traveled slowly and were mediated by social hierarchies, religious authority, and proximity to urban centers. The mother's family, living along a remote stretch of the river, experienced the full effect of this delayed scrutiny. By the time authorities might have acted, the events were often already concluded or obscured by natural processes. Medical understanding was limited, particularly in rural Missouri. Common illnesses, injuries, and the effects of malnutrition were poorly understood by contemporary practitioners. This knowledge gap influenced both the management of children's health and the interpretation of unusual outcomes. Illness or disappearance could be attributed to disease, accident, or divine will, and such ambiguity provided cover for extraordinary acts. The mother's management of the household intersected with these gaps in understanding, allowing for behaviors that would later appear shocking to observers with the benefit of hindsight. Cultural narratives and folklore shaped interpretation of unusual events. Tales of spirits, river demons, and moral retribution circulated widely, blending observation with imagination. The mother's actions, though ultimately rooted in human decision-making, were later framed through this lens of folklore, amplifying both fear and fascination. The combination of historical fact, environmental influence, and the power of narrative created a layered understanding of behavior that continues to captivate historians and audiences alike. In sum, the social, cultural, and economic context of Missouri in 1857 created conditions ripe for the convergence of isolation, maternal authority, and environmental manipulation. Families existed in a balance of self-reliance and community dependence, moral expectation, and geographic isolation. Rivers and woods offered both sustenance and secrecy. Social and religious norms were potent yet inconsistently enforced, and medical understanding was limited. Economic and environmental pressures contributed to daily stressors that shaped decision-making. providing a historical backdrop against which extraordinary acts could occur. This historical lens allows the audience to understand the setting in which the mother's actions unfolded, not to excuse them, but to contextualize them. It is within this combination of isolation, social expectation, environmental influence, and limited oversight that the narrative takes root. By examining Missouri's landscape, economy, culture, and social norms, viewers gain insight into how ordinary lives can intersect with extraordinary darkness, and how history, geography, and human psychology converge to create moments that resonate through time. With this context established, the stage is set for the detailed unfolding of events, the incidents, choices, and moments that would transform a quiet Missouri household into a story of enduring horror. The sequence of events in this quiet Missouri homestead unfolded with a chilling rhythm, each day merging into the next under the steady hand of the mother, whose presence governed both household and riverbank. To the outside observer, life seemed ordinary. Children playing near the edge of water, animals grazing, and the steady routines of a subsistence farm. Yet beneath these routines, a pattern of deliberate action took shape, so subtle that it was invisible to casual notice but devastating in its consequences. It began with the small, seemingly inconsequential, a child slipping along the muddy riverbank, a basket of fish overturned in the morning mist, a faint splash that went unnoticed. Each incident was recorded only in memory, fragments of events that would later coalesce into a narrative too horrifying to ignore. The mother's intervention was meticulous. A hand reached for a child just as the current threatened, yet sometimes a decision was made to allow the flow to dictate the outcome. Observers would later describe this stage as almost ritualistic, a sequence of controlled actions that blurred the line between care and calculation. One autumn morning, the youngest child stumbled near a hidden eddy where the river's flow deepened unexpectedly. The mother, observing from the bank, allowed the child to fall, moving only when absolutely necessary to prevent total catastrophe. The river, indifferent yet integral to the unfolding events, carried the child's small body downstream before the mother retrieved it, wet, shivering, but unharmed in appearance. The tension of the moment was heightened by the sounds of the forest, rustling leaves, the distant cry of a bird, and the whisper of water against stone. Neighbors, unaware of the near calamity, continued their daily routines, oblivious to the undercurrent of danger. As weeks passed, more incidents followed a similar pattern. A basket of food was left near the edge of the water, only to spill in a sudden gust of wind or the slip of a small hand. The mother's intervention was selective, calculated, and precise. Each event created an environment of unpredictability for the children, yet the household remained outwardly calm. Observers who later recounted these moments emphasized the strangeness of domestic normality juxtaposed with subtle terror. Meals were prepared, chores performed, and conversation maintained, while beneath it all, a hidden rhythm of peril persisted. Animals, too, became unwitting participants. Chickens scattered along the riverbank, ducks flapped in panic, and even dogs hesitated near the water's edge. Their reactions mirrored the children's experiences, amplifying the sense of unease and unpredictability. Each movement of an animal, each sudden splash, became part of a larger choreography orchestrated by environmental cues and the mother's silent guidance. Those who observed only glimpses reported a tension that was both natural and unnerving, as though the household itself had become a theater of controlled chaos. As winter approached, the incidents grew more complex. Ice formed along the river's shallow edges, creating treacherous footing. One child slipped onto thin ice and partially broke through, the chill biting through clothing and skin. The mother, positioned on the bank, allowed the child to struggle momentarily, observing the struggle as carefully as one might observe an experiment. Only at a precise moment did she intervene, pulling the child to safety with hands that bore no tremor. The emotional weight of such moments, later recalled by witnesses and through folklore, emphasized both fear and awe, the control of life and death, performed with an air of calm detachment. A particularly harrowing incident occurred during a flood. The river swelled after a week of rain, currents strong enough to uproot fences and sweep away tools. The family's property was partially submerged, and the children's play area reduced to small patches of mud. The mother, executing precise calculations of timing and movement, guided children away from the most dangerous stretches while simultaneously testing the boundaries of their understanding of danger. The tension in the narrative comes not from sudden violence, but from the deliberate orchestration of risk, the measured exposure to the river's power, and the controlled observation of the results. Other incidents involved the use of tools and implements in ways that amplified tension. Axes were handled with apparent normality, yet their placement along workbenches and near the river's edge required constant attention. Knives used in meal preparation were observed as instruments of domesticity, yet within the structured environment, they became part of the ongoing psychological choreography. Each slip, each fall, each misstep was subtly amplified by the mother's intervention, or deliberate lack thereof. Observers, if present, could only speculate at her intentions, creating an atmosphere of silent horror that grew with each passing day. Neighbors reported moments that defied easy explanation. A child would vanish from sight for minutes at a time, only to reappear seemingly unscathed. Objects floated downstream or disappeared entirely, and the mother's calm explanation seemed plausible yet unconvincing. Even the community's livestock seemed to respond to invisible cues, moving with hesitation or sudden bursts of panic at times when no immediate threat was apparent. This interplay of natural and human behavior created a tableau in which reality and perception intertwined, leaving an indelible mark on collective memory. The mother's strategy extended beyond immediate physical risk. She manipulated light, shadow, and sound to maintain control. Lanterns flickered unpredictably, river mist obscured vision, and the forest provided cover for movements that would have seemed inexplicable. Children and observers alike were subjected to an environment in which the boundaries between play, accident, and deliberate orchestration were blurred. Psychological tension became as central to the narrative as physical danger, illustrating the capacity of ordinary circumstances to produce extraordinary fear when shaped by deliberate action. Several incidents involved near-tragic outcomes. Children fell into deeper parts of the river, objects became hazards underfoot, and the mother's selective intervention highlighted the precariousness of life along the water. Reaction from neighbors was minimal during these early episodes, as the subtlety of her orchestration prevented clear interpretation. Only later, when patterns emerged and rumors circulated, did the community recognize the full scope of events. The horror lay not in sudden violence, but in the prolonged, methodical shaping of risk, and the mother's ability to maintain domestic normalcy while exposing her family to controlled peril. Throughout these incidents, the river acted as both accomplice and archive. Currents carried away evidence of minor missteps, while the mother's interventions ensured that outcomes remained within observable limits. Each event, though seemingly isolated, contributed to a growing pattern that, in hindsight, revealed a calculated approach to dominance, risk management, and psychological conditioning. The landscape itself, the river, the banks, the surrounding woods, became an integral part of the narrative, shaping behavior, concealing action, and amplifying the eerie tension of daily life. By the time observers began to connect incidents into a coherent narrative, the mother's control over the household, the children, and the river had already reached a near-total extent. The cumulative effect of these events, the falls, the near drownings, the subtle manipulations of tools and environment, produced an atmosphere of suspense and silent horror that lingered long after the immediate incidents concluded. The narrative demonstrates how the ordinary, when structured by intention and environmental mastery, can produce profound unease, a form of horror rooted in observation, anticipation, and the unpredictability of controlled risk. The river remained central to the unfolding story, a silent participant witnessing each act. Currents carried both life and traces of disappearance. Mist shrouded motion, and natural rhythms dictated opportunities for intervention. Through all these incidents, the mother maintained a calm, deliberate composure that would later become central to the mystery. Observers described the dichotomy of outward normality and inward deliberation, a tension that transformed ordinary riverbank life into a tableau of subtle terror. In retrospect, each incident, each slip, fall, or near miss served to reinforce a broader pattern. A household in which the mother's quiet authority orchestrated danger, psychological tension, and controlled outcomes. The community would later struggle to understand how routine domestic life could conceal such a sequence, and how a single individual, Exercising knowledge of environment, behavior, and risk could shape events in ways both horrifying and mesmerizing. The incidents provide the foundation for understanding the larger narrative, illustrating the interplay of environment, psychology, and deliberate action that defines this dark chapter of Missouri history. As news of the incidents slowly permeated the wider community, reactions were immediate, varied, and often contradictory. Those who had lived nearby recalled the mother's family with a mixture of unease and disbelief, struggling to reconcile the orderly appearance of the household with the disturbing pattern of events along the river. Friends and neighbors spoke in hushed tones about moments they had observed, children disappearing briefly, strange arrangements of food, and peculiar behaviors that in hindsight seemed impossible to ignore. Gossip, carried along narrow dirt roads and through church pews, amplified the tension, blurring the lines between fact and speculation. Family members, too, responded in complex ways. Older children remembered both warmth and fear. The mother's meticulous care and the ever-present undercurrent of danger coexisted, creating an environment in which obedience and caution were inseparable from anxiety. Siblings described experiences of near accidents with the river or household tools, events that were simultaneously frightening and normalized within the rhythm of daily life. The duality of nurture and risk shaped their understanding of authority, and for many, left a lasting imprint on psychological development, a tension between trust in a caregiver and the instinctive recognition of danger. Local religious leaders and pastors became involved as rumors reached the congregation. Sermons referenced morality, sin, and divine oversight, with some community members interpreting the incidents as either a test of faith or a manifestation of hidden vice. Clergy expressed concern for the children's well-being, yet the remote setting and limited authority restricted their ability to intervene directly. Letters and occasional visits conveyed admonition and counsel, but they could not penetrate the household fully. The interaction between spiritual authority and isolation created a sense of helplessness, amplifying the community's anxiety and curiosity while leaving the mother's actions largely uninterrupted. Doctors and medical practitioners of the period offered another layer of interpretation, constrained by contemporary understanding. Child health was often poorly monitored, and illnesses or minor injuries could be attributed to accident or natural cause. Observers noted that unusual behavior, whether in children or adults, was often explained through rudimentary theories of temperament, environment, or hereditary predisposition. Psychologists, as a formal discipline, had not yet developed systematic methods to assess risk or behavioral anomalies, leaving early reports anecdotal and speculative. This gap in scientific understanding created ambiguity. Neighbors and physicians alike struggled to categorize the mother's actions, caught between rational explanations and the eerie patterns emerging along the river. Newspapers began to report on unusual occurrences. Though accounts were often sensationalized or fragmentary, headlines, when they appeared, emphasized the mystery rather than explicit detail, framing the mother's behavior as a curious anomaly. Correspondents relied on second-hand accounts, and the combination of sparse information and dramatic speculation heightened public fascination. For some, these reports sparked outrage. For others, they fueled fear of hidden dangers in seemingly ordinary rural life. Letters to editors reflected community debate, revealing a spectrum of interpretation, from moral condemnation to anxious curiosity. The broader social reaction also reflected prevailing cultural norms. In a society where maternal authority was revered and domestic competence equated to moral virtue, the revelation of potentially harmful behavior was particularly jarring. Observers struggled to reconcile the archetype of the nurturing mother with the unfolding narrative, producing cognitive dissonance that intensified the horror. Communities, reliant on trust and cooperation, faced a dilemma: intervene and risk social disruption, or observe and risk allowing harm to continue. This tension shaped conversations around responsibility, accountability, and the boundaries of observation in rural life. Neighbors who attempted to intervene were often met with polite resistance, maintaining social norms while preserving the mother's privacy. Requests to assist with chores, offer childcare, or advise on household management were diplomatically declined, leaving outsiders frustrated but unable to directly prevent incidents. The interplay of manners, social expectation, and isolation reinforced the mother's control over her household. highlighting the subtle mechanisms by which individuals could exercise authority within the constraints of community norms. Psychological interpretations, though primitive, began to emerge as discussions persisted. Some speculated on the effects of isolation, maternal stress, or hereditary predisposition toward unusual behavior. Others considered environmental pressures, scarcity, unpredictable river conditions, and the burdens of subsistence farming could create conditions for behavior that appeared extreme, but was, in context, understandable. These reflections, though tentative and anecdotal, provided early frameworks for understanding how ordinary circumstances could intersect with extraordinary acts, framing the mother's behavior in both human and historical dimensions. The tension between observation and understanding shaped subsequent narratives. Witnesses described a sense of being watched or manipulated by circumstance, a perception that blurred the line between agency and environment. Observers of the riverbank recalled moments when the mother's movements appeared almost choreographed, each action precise yet concealed. Such recollections contributed to the growing mythos surrounding the family, blending factual observation with psychological impression and reinforcing the haunting quality of the story. Letters exchanged between families in nearby communities reveal another layer of reaction. Concern, fear, and curiosity were intertwined as households sought to comprehend events that seemed at once mundane and extraordinary. Discussions focused on children's safety, the reliability of domestic authority, and the apparent normalcy that concealed danger. These communications illustrate the collective struggle to interpret isolated events within a coherent framework, highlighting the cognitive and emotional mechanisms by which communities process anomaly and threat. The press, clergy, medical practitioners, neighbors, and family members each contributed to a multifaceted reaction. While no single authority could fully intervene, the convergence of observation, rumor, and partial insight created a social pressure that would eventually intersect with legal and moral frameworks. The cumulative effect of these reactions underscores the importance of social context in shaping both the perception and consequences of unusual behavior. By examining the responses of the community, we gain insight into the interplay between isolation, authority, and social expectation. The mother's ability to maintain control over her household was facilitated not only by her actions, but by the limitations and assumptions of those around her. Fear, curiosity, and speculation combined to create an atmosphere in which direct intervention was rare, yet observation and interpretation continued, leaving a layered record of social, psychological, and moral reactions that would inform historical accounts for generations. This social landscape, marked by reverence for maternal authority, limited oversight, and evolving understanding of psychology and environment, provides a crucial context for understanding the mother's actions. Community response, while constrained, was neither absent nor passive. It manifested through rumor, observation, correspondence, and reflection. These responses, filtered through cultural and historical lenses, help us comprehend not only what occurred along the Missouri River, but also how a community attempts to reconcile the ordinary with the extraordinary, the visible with the hidden, and the moral with the unthinkable. The culmination of months of subtle, orchestrated peril unfolded on a mist-choked morning along the Missouri River. A low fog crept along the water, curling around reeds and rocks, softening the edges of the familiar landscape into a world of gray uncertainty. The children moved with caution along the slippery banks, their small boots sinking into damp mud, eyes wide with both curiosity and apprehension. The mother followed at a measured distance, her posture calm, yet every movement precise, attuned to the shifting currents and the unpredictable river environment. This day, unlike any before, would mark a convergence of tension, decision, and the haunting power of the river itself. The events began with an accident, or what appeared accidental to the untrained eye. A child reached too far for a cluster of berries hanging over the river, lost balance, and plunged into the water. The mother's response was delayed, measured, as though observing an experiment in real time. The current tugged insistently at the child's small body, the cold water biting at skin and clothing. Neighbors who glimpsed the scene from a distance saw only the struggle, unable to comprehend the quiet orchestration behind it. The mother's hand remained poised near the water's edge, ready to intervene only at the precise moment when rescue would maintain both life and the integrity of her controlled environment. A sudden cry, split the fog, a sound that carried unnervingly along the riverbank. Birds lifted in alarm from reeds, their wings slicing through the mist, while the mother's figure moved with quiet determination, reaching out at the exact instant to grasp the child, pulling them from the water just as a submerged current threatened to claim them. Shivering and dripping, the child's eyes met the mother's, and for a fleeting second, fear and relief mingled in silent acknowledgement. This delicate balance of danger and salvation became the defining tension of the day, illustrating the psychological choreography that had been developing for months. The mother did not stop with a single rescue. The fog thickened, and the river, swollen from recent rains, whispered threats as it lapped at the banks. Objects left along the water, tools, baskets, even simple sticks, created additional hazards. Another child slipped on the muddy embankment, twisting near a jagged root. The mother's attention shifted seamlessly, balancing multiple risks with an almost preternatural awareness of timing and consequence. Each intervention was deliberate, calculated to maintain the illusion of routine while threading through the extremes of physical and psychological tension. At one point, the river itself became a theater of surreal horror. A log, loosened by the flood, floated downstream at an alarming pace. The children, unaware of the danger, laughed as it drifted closer, their innocence contrasting starkly with the lethal potential of the environment. The mother's hand shot out, redirecting the log with the skill of someone intimately familiar with water currents and object trajectories. Every movement was precise, a combination of anticipation, timing, and subtle guidance. Observers from afar, neighbors peering from concealed vantage points, could see the coordination but not the intent, creating a sense of eerie suspense that hovered over the scene like the morning mist. The climax reached its peak when the largest child, emboldened by prior interventions, ventured too close to a submerged channel, where water roiled over hidden rocks. The mother's voice, calm and firm, instructed retreat, yet the child hesitated, caught between curiosity and caution. A sudden slip sent them tumbling into the deeper water, and for a heart-stopping moment, the child was swept away by the current. The mother plunged forward with uncanny speed, grasping the child and guiding them back to safety, her hands slick with river water and mud. The emotional intensity of the moment, the interplay of relief and terror, marked the apex of the orchestrated peril that had defined the household for months. This day's incidents did not occur in isolation. The environment, shaped by seasonal shifts and hydrological patterns, amplified every misstep. Fallen branches, hidden rocks, and swirling currents became silent participants in the mother's orchestration, creating a natural stage for tension. Her movements synchronized with these environmental cues, demonstrating not only mastery over her surroundings, but also an acute understanding of risk and perception. Observers later recounted feeling a disquieting mix of admiration and fear, recognizing both the skill and the moral ambiguity embedded in her actions. The children, in turn, began to exhibit heightened awareness. Small gestures, sudden retreats, and cautious play reflected the subtle psychological conditioning imposed over weeks of orchestrated incidents. Fear and trust intermingled, creating a complex emotional landscape. Observers noted the tension in every gesture. A hand extended too far, a glance toward the water, a hesitant step on mud. The mother's interventions became simultaneously nurturing and terrifying, illustrating the duality of control, protection, and calculated risk. Neighbors, drawn by fragments of rumor and observation, converged hesitantly on the scene. Some called from a distance, their voices uncertain, offering assistance or warning, but the mother maintained calm authority. Her control over both children and environment remained absolute, reinforced by social deference, isolation, and mastery of timing. The convergence of human presence, environmental unpredictability, and orchestrated peril created a tableau of silent horror, where every observer felt both fascination and dread. As the day progressed, minor accidents continued, splashes, slips, and collisions with river debris. Each was met with precise intervention, ensuring no lasting harm while maintaining the psychological tension of risk. The cumulative effect of these events, amplified by weather, fog, and environmental hazards, created a narrative of controlled chaos, a dark dance of survival, fear, and maternal authority. Those who later reconstructed the events emphasized the intensity of emotion, moments of panic interspersed with calm resolution, a rhythm of horror and relief that left an indelible mark on memory. By evening, the fog lifted and the river resumed its quiet flow, indifferent to the day's orchestration. The children were wet, cold, yet unharmed. The mother's composure remained unbroken. Observers departed, carrying fragmented impressions and rumors, unable fully to articulate the tension, precision, and psychological complexity they had witnessed. The climax, while resolved physically, lingered in the minds of all who glimpsed it, leaving a haunting impression of how ordinary life, environmental mastery, and deliberate orchestration could produce extraordinary suspense. In retrospect, this climactic day exemplified the mother's method, orchestrating danger with meticulous attention to environmental cues, psychological conditioning, and physical risk. The combination of natural hazards, calculated intervention, and social isolation produced a tension both tangible and invisible, illustrating the capacity for human behavior to manipulate circumstance while maintaining the facade of normality. The river, children, and observers all played roles in a narrative that was at once ordinary and horrifying, a climax that resonated far beyond the riverbanks of Missouri. The days following the climactic events along the Missouri River settled into a quiet tension that lingered like fog over the land. The children, though unharmed physically, carried an imprint of the river and the mother's orchestrated interventions deep within their memories. Their play was slower, more deliberate. Glances toward the water were cautious, and the once carefree laughter along the banks was tempered by the understanding of danger, both immediate and subtle. Those who had observed from afar sensed a change in the household, a weight that could not be measured in days or weeks, but which stretched indefinitely into the family's collective consciousness. Neighbors, journalists, and distant relatives continued to speculate about what had transpired. Letters exchanged among families recounted fragments of rumor and observation, emphasizing the strangeness of the mother's control over events. Some framed her behavior as deliberate malice, others as an extreme form of maternal vigilance, while still others invoked explanations of mental instability or divine trial. The ambiguity was perhaps the most enduring aspect of the story, a sequence of actions that seemed to challenge understanding, defy conventional morality, and yet remained grounded in the visible world of river, mud, and household routine. For the community, the events became an enduring cautionary tale, whispered to travelers and retold at gatherings long after the children had grown. The river itself became a symbol of both life and quiet terror, a constant reminder of how ordinary circumstances could conceal extraordinary danger. Folklore intertwined with fact, creating a narrative in which the mother's identity, intentions, and psychological state remained partially obscured, as though the river had absorbed some of the secrets and refused to release them fully. Psychologically, the story illustrates the tension between control and chaos, authority and vulnerability. The mother's ability to orchestrate incidents without immediate harm reflects an acute understanding of both physical and environmental dynamics, as well as human behavior. Yet the ethical and moral implications lingered unresolved, raising questions that remain compelling to this day. Could a mother, in full awareness of risk and consequence, manipulate her environment and children in such a deliberate manner? Or were her actions shaped by desperation, isolation, and the pressures of survival in an unforgiving landscape? The historical record offers no definitive answer, leaving only interpretation and speculation. The children, once grown, carried a dual inheritance: the memory of peril and a nuanced understanding of maternal authority intertwined with fear. Their recollections, when shared with outsiders years later, were fragmented, sometimes contradictory, yet consistently emphasized the quiet tension of those formative years. The river, the mud, the tools, and the fog were as present in memory as any human figure, underscoring the interplay between environment and behavior that defined the family's experience. Medical and scientific reflection on the events remains speculative. Contemporary understanding of child psychology, trauma, and environmental risk highlights the potential for both physical and psychological consequences from prolonged exposure to controlled danger. Observers today might interpret the mother's actions through the lens of trauma theory, maternal stress, or behavioral pathology. Yet the historical context, the isolation, subsistence demands, and limited oversight provides a framework in which these behaviors could manifest without immediate detection or intervention. The events serve as a study in the intersection of human decision-making, environmental mastery, and the unpredictable consequences of risk. The river, ever silent, continued to carry memories downstream. Local residents described lingering impressions, footprints in mud that disappeared too quickly, splashes heard without source, and the uncanny sensation of being watched along the banks. These stories, part fact, part legend, reinforced the haunting aura surrounding the mother's household. Over time, the tale became emblematic of the hidden dangers within seemingly ordinary domestic life, a story preserved through retelling, folklore, and historical record alike. Even decades later, scholars and storytellers return to the Missouri River, attempting to reconstruct events, motivations, and outcomes. The mother's identity remains largely obscured, her personality glimpsed only through actions rather than documentation. Her decisions, deliberate and mysterious, continue to provoke reflection on the nature of authority, the psychological dynamics of family, and the complex interplay between environment and human behavior. The river, a silent witness, holds fragments of a story that defies complete comprehension, leaving the narrative suspended between history and legend. Ultimately, the tale of the mother who fed her family to the river is a study in dualities, protection and peril, nurture and control, visibility and concealment. The tension created by her actions, coupled with environmental mastery and community isolation, produced a sequence of events that continues to resonate as both historical fact and moral parable. The river, indifferent yet omnipresent, carries the echoes of these events, leaving traces in memory, folklore, and reflection. For the audience today, the story prompts contemplation of the hidden complexities in ordinary life. How much of daily behavior goes unnoticed? And how do isolation, environmental pressures, and human psychology intersect to produce outcomes that challenge understanding? The mystery remains unresolved. The mother's intentions, the limits of control, and the long-term consequences on her children and community persist as questions without definitive answers. The story concludes not with closure, but with enduring ambiguity, inviting reflection, speculation, and a lingering sense of unease. In this way, the events along the Missouri River transcend the historical moment, becoming a meditation on human nature, environmental influence, and the subtle intersections of fear, authority, and survival. The mother's presence, both protective and disturbing, leaves a haunting impression that lingers long after the river has calmed and the children have grown. It is a narrative that refuses simplicity, offering instead a layered tableau of tension, mystery, and reflection, a story that endures in memory, study, and the shadowed waters of the Missouri itself.